The Badgers had a disastrous senior day in Madison. Can they get past it, or is it a sign of things to come? I'm Rajiv. He's Justin. Here we go.
Welcome to the Bucky Report, your destination for all things Wisconsin Badgers. Authentic takes.
Oh my God.
Game analysis.
Touchdown Badgers! Ring one up!
And discussion from the fan perspective.
Woo-hoo!
Thanks for joining us and on Wisconsin.
You have your YouTube on, Justin?
Me?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I just heard an echo. Are you hearing an echo?
I don't believe so.
It could be me.
I'm closing out everything that's not us, though. Yeah, okay. Well, that's robust. How's everybody enjoying that fine filmmaking experience that's going on?
Welcome to the Bucky Report. We are your hosts, Rajiv and Justin, back together on a Sunday evening to talk about all things Wisconsin Badgers. On today's show, the double bye was on the line in what we expected to be a routine win at the Kohl Center, but 17th place Penn State had other ideas. We'll get into the collapse of the Kohl Center and dive into the ramifications of the loss and how we expect the Badgers to respond. The Big Ten tournament is around the corner. We'll show you the bracket and preview the Badgers' road to a potential championship. We'll also quickly touch on Jackson Bell, who is the newest basketball recruit. The 6'5" guard out of New Zealand becomes the second member of the 2026 class. And lastly, spring football continues to get closer, but we turn our attention to the class of 2026 and this past weekend's Junior Day in Madison. Who do we want most from the group that visited? We are at the Bucky Report on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what we're doing, hit the subscribe button so you know we make new content. Appreciate all the support for the show. Like button, subscribe, all that good stuff is always good for algorithm jazz. Sorry about the delay. That's not on me. That's on the guy to my right over here, Justin Julka, who was out running, by the way, because he thought we were doing the show later tonight, which is why if you're seeing a sweaty Justin, that's what's happening.
I'm glowing.
You're glowing.
Yeah, we're giving all the female fans in attendance, the maybe 2 or 3 in there, exactly what they want. Wow. Sweaty middle-aged dad bod. That's right. That's what we're looking.
That's what they want. Quick programming note. We were going to do a full Nick Osen, as you guys know from 247 Sports. He's going to be joining us we haven't scheduled it yet, but probably a midweek show. He wants to do a full Junior Day review of this. So we're going to go through all 11 guys that were here, talk through all of them. So if you're interested in that, check out our midweek episode. Today, we're going to touch on just a few of the ones that we liked, just based on, film that we have seen. All right. So yesterday was a tough day. Very, very tough day for Badger fans. Absolute disaster. Now, in the end, it doesn't really matter all that much, other than it does matter because it's senior day, because it's the last game of the season, because we lost the double bye and all the things that went on. I was furious watching that. Justin, what happened in the Kohl Center yesterday? What are your thoughts? What a disastrous game.
I mean, we've been up and down now for about the last, 2-3 weeks? This team seems to be I don't think that they're tired so much as it seems like they're mentally fatigued. They've been sloppy, like going on now, the past 4 or 5 games. It's just been all over the place in terms of play. They'll have some really crisp sections of games where they're playing really well. And then you'll see times where they're throwing the ball over the place. They're turning it over. They're taking ill-advised shots or just missing wide open looks. And that just screams to me a team that's not mentally locked in right now. And we're kind of seeing this a lot with Wisconsin over the last few years. I'm hoping that doesn't happen this season. I feel like there's a chance here for them to right the ship and get going again. But right now, there's some of those hints that we've seen in prior seasons, and I'm hoping they figure this out. I think that this team could use a rest. It would be really good for them to have maybe 1 or 2 games here and get out in the tournament and just have some time to recalibrate heading into the NCAA tournament. But man, that was a rough game.
I mean, it's just ridiculous. Like, we were up 40-27, cooking. We were actually cooking Penn State. And I'm thinking, okay, like, how many points can we actually win by? And then the next 3 possessions we missed shots. Penn State got fouled. and made one free throw out of two at 3 consecutive times to get to 30-40. And then it just kept on going. And then in the second, so we scored 40 points in the first 15 minutes of the game, and then 35 the remaining 25 minutes of the game. And meanwhile, we allowed Penn State to score 50 second half points. 51, actually, I think. That's absolutely insane. I don't really understand how you can't get up for that kind of a game. What really infuriates me is the defense. How can you have such poor defensive effort in that game? Like, we've talked all year, Justin, about the defensive intensity and how at times it's bad, at times it was getting better, and where things were looking up. And then all of a sudden it just disappeared yesterday, pretty much. No one was closing out on threes at all. And then when they were closing out, they were jumping and leaving their feet and keeping the lane wide open. There was just absolutely no on-ball intensity whatsoever. We couldn't solve their zone that they ran. They run multiple defenses. We couldn't do anything about it. We looked like we were going down low to Crowl early, but we didn't do that enough in the second half. And ultimately, the three-point shooting continues to be a bit of an issue. We shot 32% yesterday, which is up from, we had 15%.
Hey, it's over 30% for once.
Yeah, right. I mean, so at least it's like not horrific, but 32.3%. But still, the downward trend kind of continues. We haven't really had a game over 40 in a while now. And it's not exactly the right time to not be peaking, right? This is when you're supposed to be peaking. So I'm just furious about this. I just, even today, I'm thinking about this now. The Big Ten tournament's bracket is set. We're going to go over that. We're going to show you the bracket, and we're going to talk through what that looks like. But ultimately, it's all comes down to the tournament after that. And I definitely am concerned about the mentality of this team now. And that's what I want to get into is how do you think this affects the mentality? Because for me, like, we have a senior-laden team. A senior-laden team is a team that does well in the NCAA tournament, right? We have a team that should be like, that nobody should want to play in the NCAA tournament, because we're veteran leadership. We've got all kinds of things going for us. We can shoot the ball really well. But right now, the mentality looks like we're lost a little bit on the defensive side of the ball. How do you feel like where we are mentally? And do you think that we're gonna basically, I've heard people say in yesterday's reaction show, people were saying, look, I don't think we're gonna win another ball game. I mean, that is a fair take at this point, but we are still 23-7. So it kind of just like, what do you think the mentality is now going
23-8?
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah, my perspective on this is pretty simple. It feels to me like a team that once they clinched the NCAA tournament, like the carrot kind of disappeared in front of them, and they just kind of started playing like, well, we're in. We can just kind of coast. Like, they're feeling themselves a little too much. Like, they had things on the line. Like, there's legitimate things that they kind of wasted in games that were right there for them to take. Like, you lose to Michigan State, that's fine. That's whatever. Who cares about that game? They had a chance to stay, and they probably will stay on the 3 line unless they lose in the first round of the Big Ten tournament.
I don't know about that. I don't think 3. I think 4 is where we're going to end up.
And, and that's a definitive possibility.
Yeah.
I think that, looking at this team, they've got to get it figured out. Like, mentally, you've got to get locked in again, and you've got to start learning to step on teams' throats again and just putting them away, because defensively it's not there. And I think offensively, like, even rebounding, like, everything seems to slip with this team that's effort stuff. You notice that?
Which is surprising, right? We have a bunch of seniors on the team. Yeah. Why is that? Why do we think that's happening?
Why don't they lock in until it's like it starts, the game gets close, and then they look like they're rattled. Like, they will coast and let a team get back in the game, and then they try to, it almost seems like they get discombobulated and start pressing. And it's like, you guys didn't have to do this. And part of it is just don't settle for, like, I realize wide open threes is part of this offense. You need to be taking them if they're there to an extent. But you can't only shoot threes. You've got to work the ball and continue to try to get shots at the rim. What made you so effective earlier in the season was being able to get the other team in foul trouble and get to the line. You shoot the 3 when it's there, and when they start extending on you, that's when you go downhill. And it feels like we just are getting content with jacking up threes, which a lot of them are open. So I understand it to an extent. But the problem is when we go cold, then we're in trouble because we go 2 or 3 straight, times down the court with nothing, and we're giving the other team a chance to claw their way back in. And we're not shooting a high percentage right now. Like, yeah, these last couple of games, if we shoot well from 3, we probably put the team away in the first half. Like, if we shot as well against Penn State as we started out, say we shoot 45% in the first half or whatever, we probably close them up. We probably end up 18 up or whatever and end up going into the half, and you can kind of look at it like you maybe broke their will. We haven't done that to a team in a while, and teams are starting to realize that if they can hang around with us, then they can make a run at us and make us uncomfortable, and we don't respond well to it.
In fact, we do the exact opposite, and we let them, we invite them back in the game right before halftime. Like, you gave Penn State all the momentum. They won an 8-0 run going into half. They're down 40-35, and they came out
promptly and tied it up.
They came out insanely confident. They were shooting. Now, listen, they shot really well. They shot 57% from 3. I mean, they made 11 3-pointers. That's very hard to beat. That's very, very hard to beat. Most teams that make 11 3-pointers have to shoot it like 30 times. They shot 19. That's not easy to do. And their big guy, Conan Niederhauser, is really good, obviously. He gave us a lot of fits. And some comments here from the community. Zach Bart says, these past few games, it just felt like the team was asleep at the wheel and never showed up. They had spurts, but they never put together a complete game. And Greg Linscomb adds, we are so inconsistent, which will be a killer in the NCAA. Have we lost our funk? Greg Gard yesterday in the press conference said they played with no bite. Mm-hmm. I mean, and I feel like, and I've saw an article today somewhere saying Wisconsin's like the foundations are starting to crumble. There's cracks. And I mean, everyone is sort of like looking at this team saying, they're a good team, but they could also get beat by a double-digit seed. And I think all of us can actually
We're getting the same attitude we got last year, where we were, a 4 or 5 seed last year, and we were the most likely pick to blow it in the first round. Well, we're putting ourselves back into that argument again. And part of it is the issue with this it's the big guys on this team that are the problem. Now, Blackwell's played pretty well, but the problem is these guys are not playing smart basketball for the entire game. And they look really good for parts of the game, but Blackwell and Tonje will have times where they just disappear and they stop doing things. It's like, you guys need to be the two that take over the game when this starts slipping. Like, you need to know when everything's going well, then you can rely on the other guys to pick up some of the slack. But when things start to slip a little bit, that's when you two need to put your impact on the game and kind of keep the team headed in the right direction. And it seems like they're front runners a little bit in that when things are going well, they're playing great. But when things start to slide, then they start to play just as poor as everybody else. And there's nobody that's stepping up and saying, all right, get on my back, let's go. And
what's your take on
Tonje was that guy early in the season?
Yeah, I mean, what do you think's going on with Tonje right now? Like, he obviously had another game where he shot 2 of 13 yesterday. He still scored 13 points because he did get to the foul line. That's something he did well. But what's your take on him? What are you seeing from him? Do you feel like, do you think he's going to turn this around? You just mentioned how they need to, but do you think he will?
I think his game projects really well for the NCAA tournament, honestly. I think the refs call a pretty tight game. It's not like the Big Ten where they let physical play slide. So he's going to get to the line a lot. The bigger question for me is how will we shoot? Because they need to realize that what wins in the NCAA tournament, 3-point shooting helps. But the teams that get downhill and get to the line, they're typically the teams that are going to win. Because they constantly put pressure on the defense, and eventually you can start to crack a team after a while. And plus, it's really hard to get out on the break when you have teams running good offensive sets. Like when you're jacking up bad threes, that's when the ball gets turned and gets, you guys on runouts. We are kind of helping with that to an extent. Now, we do a pretty good job of getting back most of the time. But I think you've noticed it too. Teams have a tendency to get out and run on us a little bit. And we don't do a great job getting back all the time.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we were kind of that team that was that run and gun style, and now teams are trying to do it against us. One of the things that drives me crazy, and I mentioned it, it's just transition offense off of turnover specifically. It seems like every time we turn the ball over, we turn the other team over. We just turn the ball over ourselves. We rush into a transitional game. JB Blackwell is he's not a very good transition player. He's just not. And the stats back me up on this. I was on the Discord last night talking to Ryan, and he showed me some of the synergy stats, and the numbers on Blackwell's transition offense is not good. Janicki's by far the worst. Tonje is one of the best. Tonje gets fouled a lot.
The one guy who can be physical and finish at the rim.
Right. Yeah. But John Blackwell really can't. And there's a problem with that. And so I get really frustrated watching the transition offense on this team, because I'm like, just stop that. Just pull it back out, reset the offense, and do something different. I don't want to see us force a turnover and then go down there and just turn the ball over right back and then give up a 3 on the other end. Like it's what starts bad cycles, And Blackwell is a part of that. Now, Blackwell had a pretty decent day yesterday, 19 points, 3 of 6 from 3-point. He shot 6 of 15 overall. A fine game from him. He only had 1 turnover, 3 assists, but I think it's some of the inconsistency that I think we see with him, and we still haven't seen Blackwell and Tonje play together, play well together at the same time, which is nuts. Klesmit's still missing. Winter got hurt yesterday. We hope he's okay. I haven't heard anything about Winter. I don't know if you have, but what do you think this team looks like when Max comes back?
I'm hoping he provides energy, but he's coming back off an injury. So how much can you expect him to give in a game? That's the part that scares me a little bit. If he can only give you 10 minutes, 15 minutes, yes, it helps. But I don't know if you can lean on him. And if you do, I don't know if you're going to have much from him the next game, because these are going to be back-to-back type games a lot of the time. It's going to be hard for him to come in and play heavy minutes.
That's a very good point. That's a really good point, because he's not fresh. And I mean, gosh, it's almost like you might want to lose one. But we'll get to the Big Ten tournament in a minute. But yeah, I mean, I think ultimately defensively we're going to be better with him out there, And from what I heard, he could have played yesterday. So like we kept him out as a precaution because we're playing Penn State. We shouldn't have needed him, right? That's fine. So I do like that. I'm okay with that decision. And the question ultimately is, will he be healthy enough? Will he be strong enough, as you pointed out, as far as endurance-wise, to play through a Big Ten tournament, to play in the NCAA tournament? But now we can lower it. We can keep his minutes low. Like we don't have to have him out there for 30, 25, 27 minutes a game. He can easily play 17 to 20 and split time with Janicki and McGee. And Janicki has given a lot of good minutes. Didn't have his best game yesterday, but definitely has given a few good minutes. Bo Dragon says it was a combined low 3-point percent shooting, which is why you shouldn't base your entire team on the 3. Greg Linscomb, if we run into a hot shooting team like Penn State in the NCAA, warm up the bus, we're going home. I mean, yeah, that's ultimately my sentiment as well, in that I've been saying for weeks, mid-majors, that's how they win. They are at a talent disadvantage. Everyone knows this. This is not a surprise. Why do the mid-majors do well in the tournament? Why do you see double-digit seeds winning every single year? It's because those teams know they are at the disadvantage, which means they fire up the 3. And when they make them, they're going to beat you. And when they don't, which is often, they'll lose. But if we're cold and a mid-major team is hot, whether it's a 13 seed, 12 seed, 14, whatever, it's going to be very, very difficult to beat those guys.
Well, they typically bring energy, which is the bigger part of it too. And I think especially this Wisconsin team cannot go into the NCAA tournament and come in with an ego. They've got to come in like the underdog and play with a chip on their shoulder, or they're going to be in trouble, because there's going to be a team like last year where you get a mid-major team that's going to come in with some fire and with a chip on their shoulder ready to play against us. I'm a little afraid that if they come out with an ego, because, we're from the Big Ten, that they're going to get blown off the court and they're going to get kind of made uncomfortable by a team that's going to come out and play super aggressive on them. And I don't know if they're prepared for that. They need to get their attitude back. This team had a little bit of swagger early in the year, and it's just not there right now.
I mean, they had the swagger yesterday for the first 10 minutes of the game, and then it just disappeared for some.
Yeah, but they couldn't pull away even with that. I mean, they were shooting the lights out and they're barely getting up. And that's part of it was them closing out on the 3-point line. Like Penn State absolutely matched us.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe, if you get up 15, then you can start to have a little swagger. Let's when you're up like 7 because the other team is shooting every bit as well as you are, let's just chill out a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Randall says, disagree. Get easier shots by beating teams down the court. Pulling it out helps defenses reset. That was probably a response to my transition comment. Randall, what I would say is I just feel like too many times we turn the ball over. We could go watch some of these games. I mean, like too often for me, we're turning it over in transition, or we're just wasting an opportunity because we're getting it blocked because we don't have that awareness. And we've done that too often for my liking. P, one of the most optimistic guys with me, love this. Tonje's one shining moment is coming. Listen, P, love that. Hopefully that's the case. Doc says guard play on both ends of the floor will be the key. Yeah, guard play always is the key in the NCAA tournament. And that's why Max Klesmit's a really big part of this, because offensively, defensively, all of it just comes together a lot better, which is massive. Ryan says we miss Max a lot. Could be as simple as Kles comes back, McGee back to the bench, easier shots for Blackwell Tonje. Yeah, I mean, this is what we hope, right? This is what happens, and that's what we need. You're right about the endurance factor, Justin. I think that is an issue that we have to think about because, how much can Max play? But yeah, in theory, Max comes back in the starting lineup. McGee goes back to the bench. Less minutes for Janicki. More depth on this bench. We should be fine, right? We should be fine. Another person I wanted to ask you about was a guy that I thought had a great game yesterday, and that's Steven Crowl. So my question to you, Justin, is has Steven Crowl been quietly the most consistent player we've had all year? What do you think about that?
Crowl, he might be. That's a tough question for me. Like, there are times when I look at it and almost say Winter was the guy. Like, they look different on the court, but statistically, they're almost interchangeable. It's probably a fair argument because I think both Blackwell and Tonje have had games where they've just been completely gone. Yeah, I think that might be fair. You're looking at this team. We haven't had really somebody that you look at that's like, I can count on this person to give me 10 every game and rebound fairly well. We could use it. We could definitely use like this team. How much better would this team be if Janicki was a year older?
How much better would this team be with Chucky Hepburn? I mean, there's a lot of factors.
I don't know. I don't feel like Chucky makes this team a lot lot I mean,
I
really don't
completely disagree with you. I think Chucky makes
that's fair. I just don't. I think that offensively, I just don't like the way he fits on this team offensively. And we have guys who already are kind of ball stoppers, and Tonje and Blackwell at times. I don't think you need another one of those guys. I think they're both more adept at getting downhill than he is.
Yeah.
So they lead to better shots. I will punch myself in the face if I have to watch another bad step back three. I mean, it is the most infuriating shot in basketball to me.
He wouldn't need to do that because he's got plenty of shooters around him. Nonetheless,
that's fair.
Chucky's no longer here. The reason I asked that question about Steven Crowl is I think he absolutely has been. I think when you look back at the season, which we're obviously going to do season in review when this is all done, and hopefully it's not done until April. I mean, who has been more consistent than Steven Crowl? Once again, I know that people were upset about his missed layups. I get it. Sometimes you're just going to miss shots. He was 2 of 4 from 3. He scored 19 points, 8 of 15 from the field, 4 rebounds, 3 assists. I know people don't love Crowl, and that's fine. There's people in the chat right now. I get it. It's all fine, but he's been the most consistent player we've had. You can look at John Blackwell. He's had his sort of in and out games. You can look at John Tonje. He's certainly had games where he hasn't been. You can't really point to a time, except that Illinois game before Greg Gard called him out. From that point on, which was a long time ago until now, look at what Steven Crowl did.
That is the first third of the season. So he's been good for the last 2/3 of the year.
Yeah.
I have had no argument about him. Honestly, I've said that, listen, I will beat up on him when I think that, and it's never as simple as scoring with him. When I look at him, the way I look at his game is simply, do I feel like he's being a productive player on the court? That can be rebounding, that can be challenging shots, that can be his defensive rotations and what he's doing. I absolutely think that he's played well the second half of the season, despite not being a huge point scorer on a regular basis. But what he has added I think he's actually been, for the most part, better than he was last year rebounding. I think he's been our best post defender not named Gilmore. And other than a couple of times here and there where I've bashed him for some of his stopping the downhill drives. Like there was one not last game, but the one before against Minnesota where he just he turned his back on a guy and let him dunk. That I was like, that's like the one thing in the game that I'm complaining about with him. But for the most part, he's been good. And I can live with what he's been. Next year, they're going to have to find somebody in the portal because Winter is not, for better or worse, he's a stretch 4. He is not a guy that I'm looking at as a post center. So you're going to have to find somebody who wants to do the dirty work on the interior going into next year because you don't have that guy right now, unless you're expecting Greppy to be a huge jump heading into next season.
I've been saying it for 2 years. We've been saying it for a while, and I'm going to say it again. We better go get a 5 in the damn portal. I don't want another year to go by that we don't get a 5 in the portal.
I don't care if he scores 4 points a game. Get me a guy who can get 10 boards.
Thank you.
And can challenge a shot here and there.
Get a bloody rim protector and make it happen. It's absolutely nuts. Ryan says people are going to miss Steven Crowl when he's gone. Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because I think that what I was thinking about this game and I'm like, who's been more consistent than him? And I don't really think that anyone has. All right. So that game was a disaster. We've talked about it enough. Let's pull this up. The Big Ten tournament bracket is set. UCLA backed their way into that 4 seed because our dumbasses couldn't win a game yesterday against Penn State. So we are the 5. As you can see there, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see this up on the screen. If you're listening to the podcast, of course, thank you all very much. We will talk through it. Michigan State's the 1. Michigan is the 2. Oh, sorry, Maryland's the 2. Michigan's the 3. UCLA's the 4. So Wisconsin's road begins with a game against the winner of Northwestern and Minnesota, which let me tell you, both of those teams have some players on them. We just played Minnesota. We know how difficult they are. Dawson Garcia is a handful. Northwestern's got a lot of good players. We beat them this year. We beat both of these teams this year. But that's not an easy matchup. And I think the first thing is for me, man, like we need to see some return to normalcy with this team. I don't really care if we don't beat UCLA. So UCLA is our next opponent, right? If we win that game, we play UCLA, guaranteed. That if we lose that game, I'm like, okay, fine. But Minnesota Northwestern, we've got to win that game because if you lose that game, then you really are talking about a drop in seeding. Now you said maybe we're a 3 seed. I think we're probably a 4. Either way, I want to play in Milwaukee. But your thoughts on this Northwestern Minnesota matchup? Like, I mean, I feel like it has to be a get right game. We cannot have a game like we just saw, and I wouldn't expect it with the senior group that we have.
Well, and we talked about this after the Minnesota game that I didn't love that game. I was glad that they finished up, almost 10 points to finish it out, but it felt like a game that we let a bad team hang around, and we did the same thing against Penn State. They need to go out in that game and they need to just take out Minnesota because I don't know if it will be Minnesota in that game, but either one of them, whoever it is, you need to blow them off the court and get your confidence back. But that is not a team that should be hanging with you. Like you have been a team that's been hanging around the top 15. A bad Minnesota team has no business hanging around with you. Go out there, execute, and get them and get an easy win and get off the court. That's what you need to be doing the rest of this game. You just need to execute. You're a more talented team. Go out and get the work done.
Yeah, and absolutely. If we win that game, so let's say we do advance. So that game is going to be on Thursday. We're playing the game against Northwestern Minnesota. They will play on Wednesday to decide who plays. If we win that game, we go to UCLA on Friday. UCLA is a team we played once this year. I was at that game and in LA. We lost. Very, very close game, although their center just absolutely annihilated us down low. I don't remember his name. I don't have it in front of me. But that's going to be a very difficult game. However, I'm actually happier it's UCLA, Justin. I was thinking had we been the 4 and Purdue would have been the 5. I don't want to play Purdue. I know we beat Purdue, but I don't want that. I don't want to play them.
No.
I'm kind of glad it's UCLA. I feel like if we get past our first game, which we should, we've got a really good shot to beat UCLA and get into the semifinals where we will likely face Michigan State, could be Indiana or Oregon as well. And then the other teams, Michigan, Maryland, Purdue, Illinois, they're all on the other side of the bracket. So we're likely going to have Michigan State if we beat UCLA. I'm happy with the UCLA matchup overall. I'm fine with that. I think that's a good It's not an easy game for us. Obviously, they beat us.
Yeah.
But it is a team that I feel like we can take down.
Yeah, I mean, that was a game that we on their home court that we barely lost but we were playing better basketball. So we'll see. I don't care if we win that game or not. Like, if we go into that game, if they lose it, I look at it as an opportunity for this team to get its head right. Because right now, I think it's far more important that this team gets locked in and ready to play than to make a run in the Big Ten tournament and potentially burn themselves out even more headed into the NCAA tournament and setting themselves up as a ripe team to get upset.
I mean, ultimately that's a question, right? Bo Dragon says, I think they need to lose, rest, and regroup. I mean, it's a fair point. I don't think we're never going to root for the Badgers to lose. I'm certainly never going to do that. But I will say, like, look, we need to win that first game. Honestly, if we lose to UCLA, Justin, I'm not really bothered by it because you're losing to a team that had the same record as you, quad one. It's not a bad loss. It's not going to hurt us at all in the seeding at that point because once you get to that quarterfinals, if we have to win that first game, once we get to those quarterfinals and you're talking about all the best teams, it doesn't matter. I'm not wanting us to lose, but if we lose, I'm not bothered by it one little bit because this team desperately needs the rest. And the last thing our fan base needs right now is a first round exit in the NCAA tournament. That cannot happen. So I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. And I feel like most people are. Yeah.
I think this team just needs to mentally get themselves back together. I don't like we have people in the chat thinking that a win, they need to get their confidence back. I don't think this team lacks confidence. I think what this team lacks right now is fortitude. They're taxed. They're burnt out. And they look like it because they'll have spurts where they play really well. And then they have times when they seem to kind of just not be able to maintain their focus. When you're shooting that poorly from three on wide open looks, I chalk that up to you're just not locked in. Like when guys are locked in shooting and they're not fatigued, they make those shots. This team seems like they're not quite there. Like they're a little bit off on it, just about everything, which is causing them to come down substantially down from where they were. They were a sharp team early. They're not sharp right now.
Brett Roll says, need to win. This is the comment you were referencing. Need to win to get some confidence back. I actually agree with Brett. I do think where this team lacks confidence. I know you said fortitude. I think they do lack confidence. I mean, that game yesterday is a confidence killer because all those guys walked into that locker room with their head held down. Those seniors had a horrible day. Like, I think they do need that because if you lose to, let's say, Northwestern, who definitely, both these teams have players. I think Northwestern beats Minnesota. If we play Northwestern and we lose that game, we've just lost to Penn State. We've already lost 3 of our last 5. So then you lose to Northwestern. You're out of the Big Ten tournament. You limp into the NCAA tournament, probably as a 4, maybe even a 5 at that point. I don't know. And then you're going up against a 12 seed. You could lose again. It's definitely an issue. Ryan has a counterpoint, which I think it's worthy of discussion. He says, counterpoint, UConn rode a tournament run to a championship. So momentum wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. That's a good point. What's your take on this? A balance between winning the conference tournament and actually pushing into being on a high going into the NCAA tournament versus the need for rest. Do you think if we win the Big Ten tournament, this team will actually function well in the NCAA tournament? What are your thoughts on that? I think
it depends on the way the team's playing headed in. Like if you're a team that it starts clicking and you make a run, that's fine. This team is not clicking right now. And my fear is that you expend a bunch of energy winning a meaningless or making a run at a meaningless conference title in the tournament, and your team doesn't have that extra gear come the NCAA tournament. They need to have an easy game for their first tournament game. They need to get off the court as quickly as possible. Maybe Klesmit helps that. And maybe he is just, we've gone down. We've been sliding one guy down on our depth and we're struggling. But man, the fact that we go from being a team that's trouncing teams to being a team that is struggling against the mediocre to bad teams in the conference, losing one piece of depth is kind of telling with this squad. Like that should not happen. We lost a guy who wasn't playing particularly well to begin with. And we're kind of struggling right now, losing that one guy. Now, Klesmit was doing a lot of other things besides scoring well. But I think the thing that I take away from this is, does it seem to you like he might be the team's toughness?
I mean, it sure seems like that. It's free. I've said oftentimes this year, I think he's like the team's heartbeat. Like he's the team's pulse, right? Like, and I think
he's their fire.
He does have that. Yeah. He kind of has that engine, right? And McGee has been the engine off the bench. But yeah, I think you're right. And I said yesterday to Ryan, I said that like, I have definitely underestimated the impact losing Max was going to have. I absolutely did. I was totally wrong about that. I knew it was going to be something, but I really didn't think we were going to be that bothered by it because he hasn't been shooting the ball that well. He is a good defender, but it's gone down a bit from last year. But I was definitely wrong about that. His impact is greatly seen, or at least I hope that's what it is. Because if he comes back and we're the same team, that would be pretty bad too. But I think we're probably in a good spot.
Expected to play in this first tournament game?
I think he's going to play. I think, like I said, I heard that he could have played yesterday. I think the situation was they chose to leave him out to be precautious, which is the right move. And I said this as well. I don't care. Like the Big Ten tournament is fine. What you cannot risk health. You cannot risk health. Like if Nolan Winter's not 100%, you sit him down. If Max Klesmit needs to play, he needs to play in the Big Ten tournament because he's got to get some legs going. But I'm not really worried about that.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say. He needs a couple of games here to get his legs under him for the NCAA tournament.
It would be good. It would be really good.
Playing on 1 day's rest.
Look, I mean, if we could have the entire team back, Winter and Klesmit, and we beat the doors off Minnesota or Northwestern, which would be fine, and we go into UCLA, we play well, I'm fine. That's okay. But it's about the health. Like going into the NCAA tournament, we've got to have that. All right, so let's quickly touch on the final point on this. We've touched on it a little bit. Your overall prediction for seeding right now in the NCAA tournament. You think we're going to be a 3 still potentially? I mean, it all has to do with the
I think they have a chance at it. I think that what I saw today was showing them reflected as potentially a 3 still. I think it's a 3 or a 4. I think that if we lose early in the tournament, we're probably going to drop to the 4 line. That would be my expectation. And there's potential that if some other team gets hot, we may get jumped. We could slide to the 5. It's really going to depend on what the rest of we're kind of in no man's land right now with a bunch of other teams.
I haven't seen the net rankings. Someone must have probably, if someone is in the chat has seen the net rankings.
CBS has a 3, ESPN has a 4. Somebody had us.
Yeah, in which, so I think that like, yeah, look, if we lose our first game of the tournament, we're absolutely going to be a 4 at best.
Yeah. I think that's a lock at that point because that would be a bad loss.
Which we already have. Which we have now. Yeah, but ultimately, I think a 5 could happen. Really could happen if that happens. Like we're at 20, so I think Brett just said I believe UW is 20 in the net. That's on the 5 line, right? I mean, so anything can happen, but we'll see what happens. That being said, the other thing we want to touch on basketball before we move over to football is Jackson Ball, commitment 6'5" guard out of New Zealand. The Kirk Penny connection lives on, right? We've got now our second guy. We had Hayden Jones in the last cycle from international. Now we've got Jackson Ball. So he's got, if you want to watch film on him, you can go to YouTube, check it out. He's got a lot of YouTube stuff out there. What are your thoughts, Justin, on Jackson Ball?
I think he's a young kid who has a big body and is pretty skilled for his age. My question on him is going to be how he matures and how the athleticism follows. He's never going to be a guy who's a super high flyer, and I don't think he's ever going to be a guy who's super quick laterally. I think he projects to me as like a Janicki plus type guy. Like long term, he might be a guy who has a little more in his bag in terms of scoring, slightly better athlete. I don't think that he's going to be a guy that we look at and go, this guy is a superstar. But that's okay. Like he doesn't need to be that. If he could be a guy that is one of those players that is just a murder to play against because he's really smart and crafty and does all the little things. And that's what he kind of projects as to me, as a guy you look at that you're like, this guy's just a pain because he's really smart when he's on the court. He doesn't take stupid shots. He plays with energy and he just knows what he's doing. Has a good feel for the game.
Zach Bart says, really like Jackson Ball. His last film video he has on YouTube looked good. Feel like he can be a gem in this class. Feel like he has a bit of Tonje in his game. That I disagree with you on, Zach. I don't think he has a bit of Tonje in his game personally, but he's a very clean, crisp player. I think you said it right. He's just very heady. He doesn't really, he's very efficient in this movement, right? Like he knows what he wants to do. He's a very crisp shooter. His release is a little bit slow at times. And I think he's going to get bodied up a little bit more if he tries to drive too much, at the next level, but he's a shooter and he's a scorer and he's a natural kind of scorer. He has an eye for the basket, right? Which is a skill. And it's a skill that I feel like some of these international guys really do possess. The competition he's playing against in some of this film, I can't really judge that. I don't know. I'd be curious, Ryan, if you're listening to this, what you think about. I did not watch Ryan's show on this, but I don't know what to make of him too much because we're not seeing him play the level of competition. However, I mean, when you got a guy that can score in multiple ways, you got that he absolutely can fire the three really well. He can shoot deep as well. That's a skill that's always going to be there. The shooting should be there. But overall, I think it's fine. In general, the New Zealand connection, the Kirk Penny connection to me is always a good thing, right? I mean, I've been saying this since we got into this whole international thing. I've been saying, yes, we need to recruit in Wisconsin, in America. That's fine. We need to do that. But it opens up an avenue for more players to come to Wisconsin. It opens up the talent pool. I'm always fine with that as long as you keep the local recruiting up, right? And we've been doing that, so I'm okay with that. But I have no problem opening the doors to international players, especially when you have that Kirk Penny connection to really grow things up.
So what I look at is when you look at guys and they get the ball, do they look like they have a plan? He's a guy who looks like he has an understanding when he sizes up a defender, what he wants to do and how he wants to play. That's when I talk about a guy like Amos, that you watch him and you're like, he doesn't have a clue what he wants to do when he gets the ball. He's just like running headlong into a wall. And this kid's trying to figure out, how do I want to attack this when he sees somebody? I like that aspect about his game. He will figure out a way to break somebody down. The question with him will be, does he have a good feel for, when he gets doubled or when he's dribbling into traffic at the NCAA level? Because obviously the level of talent around him is going to be, it just jumps up so significantly. And some of the film that you watch on him is like, man, he's not playing the greatest competition. He's a man amongst boys in a little bit of it. Now, he looks good. Mm-hmm. Like I'd rather see a guy who looks like he's clearly better than everybody, but I think he's skilled in the way you want to see in that situation, where you look at it and it's like he's not playing stupid, even though he knows that he's got the other guys physically overmatched. Like he's still playing within himself. That to me is a good thing. Is you develop nothing but bad habits, and I feel like you kind of limit your game when you play against that type of stuff and don't look to maximize what you're doing on the court. He seems to have a pretty good feel for trying to make the right basketball play in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it looks like a solid add to the 2026 class, which now has 2 players in it. Fenderson is the other one that's already in that class. We've got 3 players in the 25 class. But ultimately what this team needs right now after this season is a big, a 5, a point guard, another wing. We are losing a ton of production on this team, which we'll get into all that, of course, as things go. A reminder, next Sunday is Selection Sunday, of course. In the evening, later, like this is our typical time slot now. This is the time that the show's gonna be happening. So we're gonna be doing our later time slot, which is around 10:30 Central. That'll be our March Madness special. We'll go back in, talk about the whole bracket, all that kind of stuff, give you all those things for next week. And remember, midweek, we're going to do some stuff with Nick Osen on Junior Day. All right, so let's turn our attention to football. We're enough basketball. I think we've beat Penn State to death now. We didn't do anything to Penn State, but we beat the game to death here. Justin looks like he's calmed down from his run now. You look like you're not sweating anymore. That's good. Let's turn our attention to football. Junior Day, we had 11 juniors in Madison this past weekend. I'm going to quickly touch on this list. And then again, we're going to go through all of this and all the players midweek with Nick Osen. But let's quickly talk through who's here. And then Justin, I'm going to ask you for a couple guys that you feel like that you've seen film on that you're interested in. We have Tayshawn Bardo, wide receiver out of Mishawaka, Indiana. Dominic Berry, tight end out of Greenwood, Indiana. A lot of Indiana guys on this, by the way, which I like to see. Mikhail Blade, that's a guy I'm going to be talking about. 6'4", 230 edge out of Chicago. Ashton Blatt, 6'4", 230 edge out of Pittsburgh. Kobe Cherry, a defensive lineman out of Indiana. King Liggins, defensive lineman out of Oakland, Illinois. Mason Martin, linebacker out of St. Louis. Gavin Meyer, offensive lineman out of Janesville. Aiden Reeder, linebacker out of Cincinnati. Blake Smythe, Travis Burgess. Who on that list, or anyone else that you've seen, especially from junior day, that had stuck out to you, people that you really like out of this group?
The guy who I see that I'm really high on and would like to see them locked down is Ashton Blatt. I watched his film. I think he has a chance to be this cycle's Clayton, where you look at his film and he's a guy who has some burst and is really athletic off the edge. He's further along from a body development standpoint than Clayton. He's probably not quite as lanky or as fluid as what Clayton is, but I think that the kid has a lot of, there's some physicality to him that I don't think Clayton necessarily has, that I like in this kid, and that he plays with athleticism and edge. He really comes downhill off the edge and is a guy that I think can be physical and kind of blow some things up. 6'4", 230 right now. I think that he probably projects to be a guy who's 6'4", like 245, and can have good size and speed off the edge.
Yeah, I like Ashton Blatt as well. And the other guy that's similar to that is Mikhail Blade. He is 6'4", 230 out of Chicago as well. I really liked him. And by the way, the only film I saw on him was a sophomore. As a sophomore, the guy's just pushing offensive linemen around. He is violent. He's got really good burst. I really think that, again, it's hard to project right now. Like we're looking at sophomore film in this case. The other guy that I really wanted to talk about was King Liggins. He is a 6'4", 265-pound defensive lineman out of Oakland, Illinois. Really, really good burst off the line. Really, really good burst. Tons of great vision. Very athletic. Really good use of his hands, too. And that's just something that you feel like some of that raw talent is always there. And, of course, it has to be developed. But I think King Liggins is one of those guys, because if you look at that frame, like this is a guy that can easily be a 300-pounder, no problem. And if he have that burst and that use of hands and kind of that violent, good vision, that screams that 3 tech, right? And that's where, and I'm always looking for those in any kind of list of potential players. I'm looking for defensive linemen because we desperately need to improve that position on our team. So King Liggins is a guy that I think is a bit underrated. It's not really underrated, but I think he's an 87 on 247 right now. But yeah, 87, 3-star 87, 6'4", 265. I really like him. I think he's good. And another guy that I would say a bit of a sleeper in this class, he's unranked right now at 247. It's Aiden Reeder, 6'3", 210 linebacker out of Cincinnati, Ohio, St. Xavier. Actually, my nephew goes to that high school, and I think he's in the same class as him. This guy's interesting. He's really raw, right? I watched all the film of all these 11 junior day guys, and his film is really raw, but he's really quick, very, very fast. And he's a violent kind of downhill tackler. However, the technique is very raw with him, right? He tackles with his arms a lot of the time. He doesn't really use his body as much. But he has kind of that like ability to be more refined. And I think you can just kind of, from my vantage point, I felt like he's a high upside guy that with proper teaching and technique could be a bit of a sleeper in this class. And I don't know where he's going to rank out with 247. But he doesn't have any star rating right now. But I think, yeah, Aiden Reeder out of St. X is kind of like my bit of a sleeper. Anyone else that you wanted to highlight in this junior day?
Yeah, I think you have a guy like, and we'll go into the wide receivers. Bardo is going to be a guy who's going to be coming in for an official visit with us too. I look at him as a guy who offers some positional versatility. I think he's a guy who can probably be slid into the slot a little bit. I don't know if I necessarily love him there, but there's some versatility with him that he can play on either outside spot, I think. And judging by the wide receivers that we're targeting, he's the guy that projects with the most kind of twitchiness in the slot. I'm going to bring up somebody, and I talked about him before we even came on here, who wasn't even at junior day. Dallas Dickerson. For the love of God, can we get this kid on campus? runs a 10, 3, 6, 100. And the film is good. He's really twitchy in the short. For a guy with that kind of long range speed, I want to see that guy get an opportunity. Because I think that when you have a guy that's that fast, it's really hard to sit on him in the short routes. And he does a really nice job of chopping it up and breaking down and kind of getting set up for the curls and the short routes. And having that would be something that this lineup has not had in a long time. We haven't had a receiver like that since probably Aberdarius, where guys struggle with, and he's significantly faster than them. Like, he's a guy you make the wrong move on, and you're just done. Because he'll outrun anybody. When I'm talking guys that are on Ohio State. Like, he's got that type of long speed when he hits a spot, that there's just guys who aren't going to be able to stay with him.
I will say this about this list, and like I said, I watched all the film on these guys. I continue to be impressed with what we are doing and who we're targeting from a recruiting perspective. I think we all have been underwhelmed with the product we've seen on the field that Luke Fickell's produced, but I don't think many people are complaining too much about his recruiting. And it stands to reason that if we continue to be on the same trajectory, that we're going to get better on the field, or we should get better on the field. And so it's important to me that this continues. I like the profile of guys they're targeting. I think that if you look back at targets from the Paul Chryst eras, there's differences. There's more athleticism. There's much more speed. There's much more dynamism, upside with these guys. And, maybe it is more raw upside and raw athletic tools, but I like what I'm seeing from this. And I think this is going to be an exciting time. Of course, we got spring football coming up. Next week is going to be all about basketball with Selection Sunday, but then after that, we will do that. So again, tune into us this week, midweek, for Junior Day stuff with Nick Osen. And then we're going to get into spring football. There's a lot to get into there, but I continue to have some excitement about this football program right now. I do. And I'm always going to be like that because we're in the middle of the offseason and we have nothing to complain about with football. This is the only time we can be excited about them. And I'm going to do that. It's not easy. Justin, we'll close the show there. We'll give a few programming notes at the end here, but any final thoughts on either basketball, football, anything else you want to touch on today?
I think it's pretty simple. Basketball's got to get its head together and be ready to play for this tournament. And hopefully we get our act together and can make a run. Football, I believe they start this week.
Thursday.
Yeah. So we'll get to see some updates on that coming through soon, which thank God I'm ready for it. I want to hear what's going on with this. I want to hear how different it is, but I'm ready to hear more about this. Let's go. Yeah, for sure. So again, midweek, Nick Osen, Junior Day stuff, Selection Sunday next week. And then of course, after that, we're going to turn our attention fully into hopefully continued March Madness discussion and of course, spring football. And there'll be a lot of good stuff happening there. The last thing I will say is this. Greg Gard said this in his press conference yesterday, that we lacked bite in the second half. I don't understand why that happened. And I'm perplexed by it because you've got guys like Tonje, you've got guys like John Blackwell, you got guys like Steven Crowl, and there's plenty of veterans on this team. We don't need to lack bite. That needs to not happen. I can accept the fact that we're not a Final Four team. And I can accept the fact that we might not even be a Sweet 16 team. But I cannot accept playing the way that we have been playing in these couple losses, especially against Penn State. That is, to me, an unacceptable way to play. And your typing is killing me, by the way. It's very loud, by the way. Hi. It's crazy to me that we actually played like that, and we did that on Senior Day, which can't happen. We've got to come out strong. We have to figure it out. Whatever happens at the Big Ten tournament, just play better. Give us something to be excited about. We've had an amazing season, and the last thing anybody wants is to see us go down in the first round of the NCAA tournament. And with that, we will see you again next week. Hopefully the Badgers turn it around. Stay tuned for all your stuff. Go check out Locked On Badgers, of course, for all of your other anything else, daily stuff. Ryan is fantastic, does a lot of good stuff on there. And with that, as always, Justin, on Wisconsin. On Wisconsin.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoy the show, subscribe to our YouTube channel at The Bucky Report or The Bucky Report Podcast from wherever you get your content. Until next time, on Wisconsin.